What happens when America's favorite Family Feud host walks straight into the lion's den of daytime television, only to find himself face to face with one of the most outspoken and controversial co-hosts in talk show history? What you're about to see is the moment when Steve Harvey's guest appearance on The View turned from cheerful conversation into a full-blown verbal showdown that left producers scrambling, audience members gasping, and one comedy legend walking off the stage. It became, without exaggeration, one of the most explosive moments ever seen on daytime TV. Before we dive into the chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which talk show host you think would win in a live debate. Trust me, after you hear what Joy Behar said to Steve Harvey, you'll definitely have an opinion. It was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance. Steve Harvey, riding high on the success of his many television projects, had agreed to stop by The View to talk about his new relationship book and his upcoming comedy special. The morning began like any other at the ABC studios in New York City. Steve showed up early, dressed sharp as ever, flashing that famous smile that made him one of America's most loved entertainers. He greeted crew members, makeup artists, and production assistants with warmth and his trademark humor. The producers had made it clear to the host that this segment was meant to be light and easy. A fun chat about Steve's projects, some laughs, maybe a little advice about love and life from a man who had seen it all. No controversy, no politics, just fun. But what no one expected was that Joy Behar seemed to have woken up on the wrong side of the bed that morning. She came in with an attitude, a chip on her shoulder, and apparently a plan to turn what should have been a friendly interview into a personal confrontation. When Steve took his seat, straightened his perfectly tailored suit, and flashed that million-all grin, everything still seemed normal. Whoopi Goldberg, who was moderating that day, had just finished the introduction and was preparing to bring him on. The audience buzzed with excitement. Many were longtime fans of Steve's from Family Feud and The Steve Harvey Show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the king of family television himself, Steve Harvey, Whoopi announced warmly. The crowd erupted. Steve walked out to a standing ovation, shaking hands, giving hugs, and soaking up the applause like the veteran showman he is. He greeted each of the co-hosts with charm, saving Joy for last. Even in that quick exchange, there was something in her body language, a stiffness, maybe even a coldness that Steve noticed, but brushed aside. He figured it was nothing. "Steve Harvey, welcome back to The View." Whoopi began once everyone was seated. "You've got a lot going on. The new book, the comedy special and Family Feud is still crushing it in the ratings. How do you keep it all together?" Steve leaned back comfortable and confident. "You know, Whoopi, I've been blessed," he said with that easy charm. "When you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. Whether I'm helping families win some money on Family Feud or helping folks figure out their relationships, it's all about connecting with people and hopefully making them laugh along the way." The conversation rolled smoothly at first. Steve told some behind-the-scenes stories from Family Feud, joked about his comedy tour, and shared bits of relationship wisdom that had the audience laughing and applauding. Everything was going according to plan until Joy Behar decided to stir the pot. Steve Joy interrupted suddenly, her tone noticeably sharper than before. "I have to ask you something." The room grew quieter. "You've built a career giving relationship advice," Joy continued, crossing her arms. "But you've been married 3 times yourself. Don't you think that's a little hypocritical?" The air in the studio changed instantly. You could almost hear the audience hold its breath. Steve's smile faded for half a second before he regained it, but the tension was already in the air. What had been a cheerful talk show moment had just turned into a very public confrontation. "Well, Joy," Steve began, his voice calm but edged with firmness, "I think my experiences, good and bad, actually make me qualified to help others. I've learned from my mistakes, and that's what gives my advice real value. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm saying I've lived it." But Joy wasn't letting up. "Isn't it convenient?" She pressed that you can make money off relationship advice while your own personal life has been complicated. 3 marriages, Steve. That's not exactly the record of someone who's mastered relationships. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. They exchanged nervous glances, clearly trying to figure out how to bring things back to neutral ground. But Joy wasn't backing down, and Steve wasn't about to fold either. "Joy," Steve said, sitting up straighter now. "You're missing the point. I don't hide from my past. I'm open about my journey because it's what makes me real. I'm not some textbook expert sitting in an office somewhere. I'm a man who's been through the highs and lows of love and marriage, and I use what I've learned to help others avoid those same mistakes." Joy smirked. "Or maybe," she said, It just makes you a cautionary tale instead of an expert. If I wanted advice on how to keep a marriage together, I'd probably ask someone who got it right the first time, not the third. Gasps rippled through the audience. This wasn't the light-hearted morning banner they'd expected. This was uncomfortable. Steve Harvey was supposed to be making them laugh, not getting grilled about his past. Steve leaned forward, his voice steady but carrying weight. Joy, what you're doing right now. That's the kind of negativity that ruins relationships. Taking someone's honesty and trying to turn it into a weapon. That's not fair, and it's not good journalism. It's just mean. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Joy's eyes glinted, not with regret, but with a kind of satisfaction. She could see she'd struck a nerve, and instead of stepping back, she pressed harder. Man-spirited, she said, laughing without warmth. Steve, come on. I'm just asking questions. You put yourself out there as a relationship expert. You sell books, you do speaking tours, you make a living telling people how to love better. Isn't it fair to ask what qualifies you to do that? Steve's smile disappeared completely now. He still sat tall, but the playfulness was gone. My qualifications, he said. Here my life experiences, all of them. The wins, the losses, the heartbreaks, the lessons. That's real life joy. That's what people connect to. By now, the other co-hosts were visibly uncomfortable. Whoopi tried to interject with a lighter question about Steve's upcoming tour, but the energy had shifted too far. The crowd was caught between laughter and disbelief. Joy folded her arms again. I'm just saying. Maybe people should take advice from someone whose relationships haven't fallen apart 3 times. Steve stared at her for a long moment, then let out a short laugh. Not one of amusement, but disbelief. You know what? Joy, he said slowly. It's funny. You talk like someone who's never made a mistake, like you've never had to grow or change. But the truth is, every one of us has fallen short somewhere. Mine just happened to make headlines. A few audience members applauded, breaking the tension just slightly. See, Steve continued, that's what people love about me. I'm honest. I don't pretend to have it all figured out. I share what I've learned so others can do better. That's called helping, not hypocrisy. Kajoy rolled her eyes slightly, clearly not convinced. But before she could reply, Whoopi stepped in with her signature calm authority. All right, let's take a breath, folks, she said. We're going to get back to the book because I actually think it's got some good stuff in it. The crowd laughed lightly, but the unease lingered. Steve smiled politely, though his eyes still carried a flicker of irritation. The rest of the segment limped along awkwardly. Jokes felt forced, lot nervous. By the time the cameras cut to commercial, Steve's patience had run out. As soon as the red light went off, he stood up, shook Whoopi's hand, and gave the other co-hosts a polite nod. But when he got a Joy, he simply said, "You could have handled that better," and walked off. The studio went silent again, stunned. A few staff members rushed backstage, trying to smooth things over, but it was clear the damage was done. What was meant to be a cheerful morning segment had turned into a viral television moment that people would talk about for weeks. Later that day, clips of the exchange exploded across social media. Some viewers praised Joy for asking tough questions. Others said she was disrespectful and had crossed a line. Steve didn't comment publicly right away, but when he finally did, he kept it simple. You can't control how people treat you. You can only control how you respond. It was classic Steve Harvey, calm, composed, and straight from the heart. But behind the scenes, everyone knew one thing for sure. The View had just witnessed a moment that would go down in talk show history. But what I'm hearing from you isn't journalism, Joy. What I'm hearing sounds like someone who seems to enjoy bringing other people down. Oh, please, Joy scoffed, waving her hand like it was nothing. Don't try to paint me as the villain here just because I'm asking you tough questions. This is what we do on this show. We don't sit around and let our guests deliver their memorized talking points. Whoopi tried to jump in, sensing things were getting out of control. Maybe we can talk about Steve's comedy special, which I heard is actually really funny. But Joy cut her off. No, Whoopi. I think this matters. Steve here has built a whole empire telling people how to live their lives. And I think our audience deserves to know whether they should be listening to someone who clearly struggled with the same things he's now preaching about. Steve's hands were tight in his lap, his knuckles pale with tension when he spoke. His voice was calm, but strained. Joy, let me ask you something. How many relationships have you been in? How many times have you given advice to friends about their love lives? Because if we're going to judge people's credibility based on their personal history, then maybe we should take a good look at everyone's record. This isn't about me, Joy snapped back quickly, clearly not liking that the spotlight was now on her. I'm not the one selling relationship advice to millions of people. No, you're just the one sitting here trying to ruin someone's reputation on national television, Steve replied, his voice getting a little louder. And for what? What's your goal here, Joy? What are you trying to do? The other co-hosts were visibly uneasy. You could see them glancing toward the producers off camera, hoping someone would step in and stop this train wreck of a segment. The audience was restless, some glaring at Joy for the way she was going after their beloved Steve Harvey, others just squirming with discomfort as the tension filled the air. Joy leaned forward, her tone sharper now. What I'm trying to do is honest journalism, Steve. Something that seems to be missing these days when it comes to interviewing celebrities. Everyone just wants to flatter their guests and toss them easy questions. Honest journalism, Steve repeated, his voice heavy with disbelief. Is that what you call this? Because what I see here is someone who sounds angry about something, taking it out on a guest who came here in good faith for a real conversation. The word angry hung in the air like a grenade that had just gone off. Joy's face flushed red, and for a second, the whole studio was silent except for the low hum of the cameras. Angry. Joy's voice was dangerously calm. Did you just call me angry? Steve knew he had crossed a line, but instead of pulling back, he leaned into it. If the shoe fits, Joy, you've been attacking me since this interview started. And for what? Because I've been married more than once, because I've made mistakes in my life. What's really happening here? Joy's composure cracked. You want to know what's happening here? I'll tell you. I'm tired of men like you making money off women's insecurities while your own lives are in shambles. You sell these books telling women to think like a man and act like a lady. All this nonsense that reduces women to some kind of formula for catching a husband. Now wait just a second, Steve said, his voice rising to meet hers. Don't twist what I do. Joy, I help people. I help families. I give them hope lot. And yes, sometimes advice drawn from my own mistakes. What do you do? What's your big contribution to the world besides sitting here and tearing others apart? The studio erupted. Some audience members clapped for Steve, others booed Joy. The whole thing was spiraling out of control. Producers off camera were waving frantically, trying to get someone, anyone, to calm things down. My contribution, Joy shouted as she stood up from her seat, her voice trembling with fury. My contribution is calling out frauds like you feed on people's weaknesses for profit. You're nothing but a snake oil salesman in a fancy suit. Steve Harvey. Steve rose too, towering over her, and you're nothing but a bitter woman who can't stand to see someone else succeed. This whole thing isn't about journalism. It's about whatever personal issues you're carrying. Personal issues? Joy screamed. How dare you try to psychoanalyze me on my own show? Your show? Steve laughed harshly. Last I checked, this is called The View, not the Joy Behar show. But maybe that's part of the problem. You think everything revolves around you and your opinions. Whoopi was desperately trying to calm things down. Okay, let's all just take a breath here. But Joy wasn't done. You know what, Steve? You want to talk about personal issues? Let's talk about how you treat your staff. Let's talk about what I've heard goes on behind the scenes of your shows. Let's talk about how the man who preaches respect actually behaves when the cameras are off. Steve's face went pale, then turned red with rage. What did you just say? You heard me, Joy said, her voice dripping with venom. Maybe the viewers would like to know about the real Steve Harvey, not the polished version you put on TV. The studio went dead silent. Whatever Joy was suggesting, everyone could feel she had just taken things to a whole new level. Steve's hands trembled with anger, and for a moment it seemed like he might completely lose control. When he finally spoke, his voice shook, with fury barely contained. Joy, I don't know what kind of sick game you think you're playing, but you need to be very careful about the things you're saying. You want to question my personal life? Fine. You want to doubt my qualifications? Go ahead. But if you're going to sit there and throw around accusations without facts, without proof, then you're not a journalist. You're just a liar. Joy's eyes burned with defiance. A liar that's rich, coming from someone whose entire career is based on pretending to be something he's not. Saint Steve, the family man, the relationship expert, the moral voice. Please. I never said I was a saint. Steve shot back, his voice echoing across the set. I've always been open about my flaws, my mistakes, my journey. But what you're doing now, this personal attack dressed up as journalism, this is exactly what's wrong with the media today. You care more about tearing people down than informing your audience. The other co-hosts had stopped even trying to mediate. They just sat frozen watching two TV veterans rip into each other on live television. The audience was split, some cheering for Steve, some siding with Joy, but everyone was glued to the chaos unfolding before them. Joy gave a bitter laugh, personal attack. Steve, I don't even know you well enough to have a personal vendetta. What I have is a professional duty to ask the hard questions that others are too scared to ask. Professional duty. Steve's voice cracked with disbelief. Joy, there's nothing professional about this. This is personal and we both know it. The real question is, what did I ever do to you to deserve this for the first time? Joy hesitated. Something flickered across her face. A brief moment of doubt, but she quickly covered it with renewed anger. You didn't do anything to me personally, Steve, but you stand for something that I find deeply disturbing. You represent this idea that anyone can become an expert on anything just by being famous enough, and you represent something even worse. Steve fired back without missing a beat. You represent this culture of tearing others down instead of lifting them up. The air was heavy. The audience sat frozen, no one daring to speak. Joy and Steve stood face to face, neither backing down, both shaking with emotion. What had started as an interview had turned into something far more raw, a battle of pride, resentment, and the clash between perception and truth. Steve's expression softened for just a second as though he realized how far things had gone. Joy, this didn't have to be like this, he said quietly. We could have had a real talk about mistakes, about learning, about growth, but instead, here we are, turning it into a fight that helps no one. Joy's lips trembled, but she said nothing. The studio lights hummed, the audience held their breath, and for a moment, the noise, the anger, and the chaos all gave way to a heavy silence that said more than words ever could. Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice steady, but wary. Okay, I think we're done here. Let's take a break. The cameras cut, but the tension didn't fade. The audience remained seated, stunned by what they had just witnessed. What was supposed to be a normal segment on a daytime talk show had turned into one of the most uncomfortable, explosive moments in live television history. Steve walked off first, jaw tight, hands shaking slightly. Joy stayed seated, staring straight ahead, her eyes still burning, but her face pale. The other co-hosts avoided eye contact, their usual smiles gone. Backstage, you could hear muffled voices, producers whispering, trying to figure out how to spin what had just happened. But there was no easy way to fix it. The damage was done for both Joy and Steve. The moment would linger, replayed, dissected, debated by millions. And somewhere deep down, both of them knew that no matter what they said next, the world had just seen a side of them neither ever meant to show you stand for this idea that being negative and tearing others down somehow makes you smart or insightful. The air in the studio was so tense it felt like it could snap at any second. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this shocking breakdown of television manners. Production assistants froze in place, unsure if they should step in or let this train wreck play out on Lev TV. Joy straightened her posture, her voice rising with the heat of the moment. You know what, Steve? I think the viewers can now see exactly who you truly are. All that charm, all that down-to-earth talk, it disappears the moment someone dares to challenge you, doesn't it? The real Steve Harvey is standing right here, angry, defensive, and lashing out at a woman on live television. Steve's jaw dropped, attacking a woman. Are you serious right now, Joy? You've been going after me from the second I sat in this chair. You've questioned my honesty, my morals, my experience, and now you're turning yourself into the victim. That's unbelievable. I'm not making myself the victim, Joy shot back, her words sharp. I'm just pointing out the fact that the man who writes books about how men should treat women is standing here yelling at a woman on national TV. I'm yelling at a person who's been coming after me for 20 minutes, Steve corrected, his voice booming through the studio. Your gender has nothing to do with this, Joy. This is about you being rude, unprofessional, and just plain mean for no reason at all. Whoopi finally found her voice, though it trembled a little. Okay, both of you, you need to take a step back and... But Steve wasn't listening anymore. He turned toward the audience, his voice full of frustration and disappointment. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today to talk about my book, my comedy, maybe make you smile a little, and share some lessons from my life. But what I found instead was someone more interested in attacking me than having a real conversation. Joy wasn't ready to back down. What you found, Steve, is someone brave enough to ask the questions that matter instead of just giving you a free pass to promote yourself. Steve turned back toward her, his voice now calm but cold. You know what, Joy? You're right about one thing. This talk has been very revealing. It's shown me exactly who you are as a person, and it's shown everyone watching what kind of atmosphere you've created here. I actually feel sorry for your co-hosts who have to put up with this tension every single day. The words hit Joy like a slap. Her face turned an even deeper shade of red, and for a few seconds she couldn't find her words. When she finally spoke, her voice shook with anger. How dare you come on my show and insult me and my co-hosts? I didn't insult your co-hosts, Steve replied calmly. I said I feel sorry for them. That's not the same thing. And as for you, Joy, I haven't said anything that your own behavior hasn't already proven in these last 20 minutes. The studio fell silent again. Steve's words hung in the air like smoke, and you could see Joy trying to make sense of what had just happened. She had pushed and provoked, trying to get Steve to lose control. Now that he finally had, she seemed unsure how to respond. Steve looked around the set one last time, the uncomfortable faces of the other hosts, the divided audience, and finally Joy herself. You know what? I think I'm done here. This isn't the talk I came for, and honestly, it's not the kind of TV that helps anybody. With that, Steve Harvey started removing his microphone. The sound crew froze. The entire room felt like it stopped breathing. Guests didn't just walk off the view. That simply didn't happen on daytime TV. Joy's eyes widened as she realized she might have taken things too far. Steve, wait. You don't have to. But Steve lifted his hand to stop her. No, Joy, I do. I need to keep my dignity and stay true to my values, even when others don't. I wish you and your audience well, but I can't be part of whatever this just turned into. As Steve stood and began walking toward the exit, the studio burst into chaos. Some people in the crowd stood and clapped for him. Others booed. The remaining co-host sat frozen, not sure how to handle this completely unexpected scene. Steve paused at the edge of the stage and turned around one final time. To everyone watching at home, he said, "Remember this. Life's too short to spend it tearing other people down. We should lift each other up, help one another, and encourage growth. That's what real wisdom is." And with those words, Steve Harvey walked off the view set, leaving behind one of the most shocking and unforgettable moments in daytime TV history. Joy Behar sat back in her chair for once in her career, completely speechless, as the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing the heavy silence, the split reactions from the audience, and Joy's face, as she realized that her aggressive style had finally backfired, and in the worst possible way. What was supposed to be a simple promotional interview had turned into a turning point, a career-defining moment for both the host and the guest, and not in a way either of them could imagine. So, there it is. The unbelievable story of how Steve Harvey's visit to The View became a heated battle of words that ended with one of television's biggest names walking off set. What's your take? Was Joy Behar too harsh with her questioning, or was Steve Harvey wrong for leaving the stage? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic stories from the entertainment.